King Kong ain't got shit on King Kong. We're flashing back 20 years to the blockbusters of 2005, which means we're flashing back to Peter Jackson's King Kong. It was Peter Jackson's follow-up to The Lord of the Rings. It was his dream project. But not everyone saw it as a dream. Some saw it as an overblown, self-indulgent nightmare. But now, 20 years removed from our expectations, how does Peter Jackson's King Kong look? Is it still as big a mess as people thought back then? Or is it secretly one of his masterpieces? King Kong is a remake of the 1933 Marion C. Cooper classic. It follows Ann Darrow, a struggling actress played by Naomi Watts, who catches her big break from director Carl Denham, played by Jack Black. He and his crew are traveling to a mysterious island where he hopes to shoot his next picture. While on board, Ann starts falling for the film's writer Jack Driscoll, played by Adrien Brody. But once they touch down on the island, Skull Island, the native people offer up Ann as a sacrifice to Kong, a gigantic ape that rules the island. Now Jack and the crew are scrambling to rescue her, while Carl decides to keep his movie going and film while they're dodging all sorts of terrifying creatures. Meanwhile, Ann starts to develop a friendship with Kong, realizing he's more than just a big ape. He is an animal with genuine feelings, and it's this relationship that might just spell doom for her and Kong. And the biggest difference between this and the original is the runtime. It's double the length. 3 hours versus 90 minutes. King Kong was the true test of the type of filmmaker Peter Jackson wanted to be. Not just spectacle-driven, but spectacle-driven by heart. Not just the CGI guy, but CGI with intention and performance. And Peter Jackson's intention with this remake seems to be not just go bigger and go better, but to go all out. So it's no wonder that the film was accused of being overindulgent, excessive, unnecessary, and bloated. But if you look past the size of this thing, because this is a massive movie, you can get a sense of what Jackson was really after. In its essence, this remake of King Kong is like a kid playing with his toys, making up a movie as he goes along. There's a real sense of glee with Jackson's filmmaking here. Not just that he gets the keys to the kingdom, but that he gets to put his imagination on screen, for better and for worse. The better is the CGI technology. Kong is played in mocap by Andy Serkis, Peter Jackson's muse, and he imbues the character with so much emotion and personality that you can't help, even 20 years later, identifying with this creature. But not just that, Jackson cast the film with true actors. Naomi Watts was coming off Oscar nominations and her blow-up success, and she takes this material as seriously as anyone in any blockbuster movie maybe ever. Her face alone is a special effect, the way she can emote, the way she uses her eyes. The casting of Adrien Brody and Jack Black have still been controversial to this day. Brody was right off his Oscar win for The Pianist, and his look and acting style are very idiosyncratic, and Jack Black too had just blown up after The School of Rock. But Jack Black, above all else, is a showman, and he imbues his Carl Denham not just with an entertainer's hucksterism, but the kind of crazed menace you see in some of his comedic roles. His performance doesn't always work, but it has grown on me so many years later. And all these characters help ground the film when we get into the monster stuff. Kong fights a T-Rex in the original. Well, here he fights 3 T-Rexes. And the way that action scene, the centerpiece of the film, unfolds is like this beautiful marriage of a kid's imagination meets the possibilities of big budget filmmaking. Yes, you can say it's too long, but the way it builds, and even 20 years later, some of the shots, how they use size and scope, are staggering. The effects in this film largely hold up beautifully, and that makes moments like the spider pit sequence absolutely skin-crawling. If you thought Jackson goes too far with the dinos, he goes way farther than you ever thought with the bugs. And truly, this is one of the most nightmare-inducing scenes of the past 25 years. And that's the beauty of this film. It has a bit of everything: horror, action, suspense, drama, romance. It all culminates in what is surprisingly an emotional ending. The thing about the original Kong is we never dive so deep into the relationship with Ann, and we're so invested in this interspecies relationship that by the time the planes come, it hits with a wallop. Simply put, the final 15 minutes is some of the best filmmaking of Jackson's career. And I gotta give a special shout out to James Newton Howard's score. Jackson and his regular composer, Howard Shore, seem to have creative differences on this one, so Newton Howard came in with like 2 weeks to go, and he gives us a beautiful, bombastic, and romantic soundscape that really elevates this film above blockbusters of 2005. At least King Kong made us feel something, whether you hated it or loved it. The blockbusters of 2005 were a way different story. In fact, 2005 might be a banner year for when Hollywood started mining anything and everything. We were pretty early in the comic craze, but comic adaptations started becoming the norm. Sometimes you get a really cool inventive one, like Robert Rodriguez's Sin City, the first of its kind to just take the comic and almost translate it panel for panel to screen. By green screening its actors onto CGI backgrounds, it could basically bring the comic to life. And for its time, it was a heck of an experiment. But that also meant we got dud adaptations like Fantastic Four, which is what we think of when we think of bad 2000s blockbusters, featuring a B-list cast, including Chris Evans at the time, subpar VFX, and a story that seemed just like an excuse to make a movie to sell toys. Well, Fantastic Four was not it. At the same time, though, this was also the age where we could still get a strange comic adaptation, and Constantine was just that, an adaptation of an obscure DC comic character, and even though Keanu Reeves wasn't a one-to-one translation of the comic character, his strange charisma elevated that movie to cult status. And luck would have it, we were also getting original superhero movies back then, and the best is Sky High, a family superhero film from Disney that's fun and bright and colorful and buoyant, and kinda got on the whole meta satirical superhero thing way before it became popular. This was also the age of the kids' book adaptations, so of course we had another Harry Potter, and we had the Chronicles of Narnia. But to bring it back to Peter Jackson, we were quite spoiled with The Lord of the Rings, because an okay Harry Potter and an okay Narnia film, well, they just don't cut it. And what mostly didn't cut it back then either were the numerous amount of sequels. There were quite a few horror sequels in 2005, especially The Ring 2, which, after the marvelous remake in 2002, was absolute dog shit. Likewise, George A. Romero came back with another Dead movie, this time Land of the Dead. But the satire and the action and the zombies really just didn't hit quite the same. A horror sequel that did hit was Rob Zombie's The Devil's Rejects. House of a Thousand Corpses was a nice attempt at a Texas Chainsaw-like B-movie, but Devil's Rejects found Rob Zombie finding his own voice, taking characters he created in that first film, putting them in an entire different type of movie, in this case an almost 70s grindhouse chase thriller, and creating a fucked up cult classic all his own. But in sci-fi, we did get two sequels that, for the most part, gave fans what they wanted. Serenity was the movie sequel to Joss Whedon's Firefly TV show. It delivered on tying a bow to that series and giving fans something they never thought they would see, their favorite characters on the big screen. And then there was Revenge of the Sith, which was loved and hated back then, and 20 years later is still loved and hated. But you know what? Revenge of the Sith is probably the best of the prequels. I appreciate and enjoy everything that happens on that level, story-wise. We finally see Anakin's descent into the dark side. He finally dukes it out with Obi-Wan in a grandiose lightsaber battle. And we finally get to that final image of baby Luke on Tatooine with the twin suns. For all the hate the prequels get, especially with the VFX that don't hold up 20 years later, this movie, for the most part, got us to the original trilogy. And you know what? That ain't a bad thing. We might be inundated with way too many reboots and remakes now, but we only had a couple back then. You could call Charlie and the Chocolate Factory a remake, but it was kind of trying to reboot the whole thing. This time, though, with Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. And if it didn't work back then, it really doesn't work now. Simply put, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory can't hold a candle to Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And those are just facts. And then there was Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds, which was both an adaptation of the H.G. Wells novel and a kind of remake of the 1950s film. But this time we had Tom Cruise as an everyman who's trying to save his family amidst an alien invasion. War of the Worlds, at least for its first hour, is one hell of a mean movie, especially the terrifying scene where the tripod emerges from the ground and immediately starts vaporizing people. Tom Cruise, of course, does what he does best, he outruns them, but not without being covered in the ash of dead people. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The first hour of Spielberg's War of the Worlds is some of the best filmmaking he's ever done. Yeah, we can balk at the ending, how it gets a little too schmaltzy, maybe a little too anticlimactic, but damn. But the biggest reboot of 2005, and the one with the biggest lasting legacy, is Batman Begins. Not only did we get an auteur stepping into a beloved franchise, but we washed off the stink of the Joel Schumacher films. Batman Begins might have been my most anticipated movie ever, so when I finally sat in the theater, I was shaking with anticipation. I couldn't believe this movie was real. So I'd like to take a little side trip and do a segment I like to call, Hey, remember how awesome Batman Begins was? You know what was awesome? Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score. Two music composition titans joining forces to give us a score that isn't just bombastic, but was also brooding and beautiful and suspenseful, and not what you would expect for a blockbuster franchise. Oh, and also the cast. Not just Christian Bale giving us the most grounded Batman, but also the supporting players. You had a string of actors who, before they decided to do any movie for a paycheck, were like catching lightning in a bottle. Liam Neeson, Gary Oldman, Morgan Freeman, Michael Caine. You had Cillian Murphy when he was on the come up. Another awesome thing was the design of Gotham. Nolan credited Blade Runner as an influence, and you see that in the set design of the Narrows. It's kind of the most comic booky thing in his whole trilogy, but it really works, and it's a little disappointing we didn't get to see it in the rest of the movies. Other awesome things. New Batmobile kicked ass, Bat Radar, Batman hang gliding. Oh, and Batman not killing, but the ending still finding a way for us to have the villain's death and it be satisfying. I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. Yeah, that just ruled. This has been, hey, remember how awesome Batman Begins was? Now, there were also original movies in 2005, especially comedies. A few of the big hits that year were Will Smith's Hitch, Wedding Crashers with Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, and especially the 40-year-old version, which ushered in the Apatow era and brought to us amazing comedic talent like Steve Carell, Seth Rogen, Paul Rudd, Romany Malco. It seemed like an inflection point for comedy. You could cut loose now, actors could improvise, you could elevate something by pure comedic talent alone. We now want our comedies to be a vibe. We wanted a hangout movie. This really ushered in that new era. So especially for me, it has a warm place in my heart because that was really the start and the heyday of comedy in the 21st century. But you also had original action movies. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which didn't quite work, but had some cool star power. The Island is an underappreciated and forgotten Michael Bay movie. Yes, it's pretty derivative, but it is really fun and slick looking if you go with it. And then you have maybe the most reclaimed blockbuster of that year, Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven. Now, the original theatrical cut of this movie doesn't quite work. It's beautiful, it's sweeping, it looks amazing, but Orlando Bloom is a big charisma vacuum at the center, and it just doesn't have that full-bodied feeling of Ridley Scott's Gladiator. But Scott's director's cut, which is over 3 hours, really expands the story. It helps Orlando Bloom's performance, it gives some of the subplots more breathing room, and it expands on the amazing battle scenes. It's a full experience now, and it's really one of the best blockbusters of 2005. Take the time, it really holds up. And Peter Jackson's King Kong holds up. This is a messy and bloated movie. It even has its own extended cut, but there's such a sense of awe and wonder and enthusiasm in the filmmaking. How many blockbusters nowadays can we say have the stamp of their director on them? 2005, for all of its faults as a movie year, did have some hidden blockbuster gems. And King Kong, as an artifact of the time, and maybe as a cult object now, so many years later, really represents, for the most part, the best of big-budget filmmaking back then. It's a movie I always think I like less than I do, and then when I put it on, I'm transported again to that big theater experience, to the giant emotions and the giant scenes and the giant spectacles, and for me, it's one I just can't resist 20 years later. Peter Jackson's King Kong still holds up so many years later. It's big and bloated, but also heartfelt and spectacular. I'll give it an essential 4.5 stars out of 5. If you like this flashback review, please like and subscribe, or follow me on Letterboxd at RamirezS316. So 2025 is over, which means my highlighting of 2005 is over, and I always wondered, was there ever a proper porno version of King Kong made? I always had the best idea. King Thong. 'Twas booty killed the beast.